So firsts are something that we are thinking about a lot this week. And I think you probably all know the expression, firsts but not lasts. Yes, first but not last. So that's what this conversation is about. Our panelists are Danica Roem, a Virginia state senator in her first term representing District 30. She previously served 6 years in her state's House of Delegates and was the first openly trans person elected to a state legislature in the United States. Brianna Titone is a member of the Colorado House of Representatives and has served that state's 27th district for 5.5 years. She is her state's first openly trans state legislator. And their conversation is going to be moderated by the wonderful Paola Ramos, a contributor to Telemundo News and MSNBC, a Hauser Fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School, and author of the new book, Defectors, which is about the rise of the Latino right in this country. So hopefully we'll get to hear a bit about that as well. Here to kick us off for a conversation about firsts, please welcome Paola Ramos, Danica Roem, and Brianna Titone.
All right, how's everyone feeling? Energized, no? Before, I know we don't have that much time, but before we started, just thought that it's important to sort of ground us in the moment that we're in. And I think so much of yesterday's message was this idea that hope is back. And I think within that message, it's this idea that people can finally once again reimagine a better future, no? Sort of see themselves in that sort of map of the United States. And I mention that only because when I think of the millions of people that have been sort of weighed down by the last couple of years and by sort of the darkness and the trauma that many people have endured, particularly folks within the LGBTQ community, I feel like the only way that many are able to see past that darkness is because of leaders like both of you, no? This idea that there have been many firsts before us, people that have paved the way, and so thank you for that. I want to start with you, Senator. As obviously has been previously mentioned, you were the first openly transgender person in any state legislature across the country when you first ran for office, and so I'm thinking of, you know, those first days of winning that first race. How much of the weight of that history was on your mind?
The weight of history that was on my mind, like when I got sworn in, it was impossible to ignore only because I had a phalanx of cameras and reporters and photographers and everything else around me. I get into the House floor and there's an entire well and all these, glass eyeballs are coming at me, and so it's just like, okay, I know they're not here because of my water infrastructure policy. Like, I get why they're here. And at the same time, you get through that first day, and then it's like, all right, let's get to work, And that was kind of the thing. At the same time, it's almost like piggybacking off of the Moms Demand panel that we just saw here a little bit ago. When I would put my right hand in the air and I was taking the oath of office with the other 100 members, that was at a time where the Virginia General Assembly and the House of Delegates allowed guns in the gallery. And I'll be super real with you.
Yeah.
This was the moment where I had my hand in the air and I said, all right, if I'm gonna end up like Harvey Milk, it's gonna be now. And so I just went through it and came out and I was like, okay. It's like, so for all the camera and everything in front of me, I had to just, put on my, very happy, good face and everything. And inside I was also very cognizant that I'm from Virginia. The NRA is headquartered 20 minutes from where I live. I had 2 firing ranges in my district. And so I know we have a gun culture in Virginia. Clearly, at the same time, the issue isn't a gun culture, it's a gun violence culture. And that was something that I had a concern about. The most important part about being a first is not being a last. And that's where Representative Titone comes in.
Exactly. I mean, how important was it to have sort of the senator's story ahead of you? I think by the time, you started in the state capitol about a year after you did. At that point, there were just a handful of openly trans folks in state legislatures, and I think between like 2022 and 2023, there was a 16% increase in representation. And so I'm curious about the network of support that you have or don't have in these positions of power. What does that look like?
Well, I mean, I'll say this music is really, really loud. Wow, it's just really good timing. I looked up to Danica, and I actually asked her a lot of questions when I ran for office to be sure that I was making the right decisions, because somebody did it and won, and how can I reproduce that result? That was what I was really trying to accomplish. So we did talk about running for office, and we realized that how Colorado does running for office is a lot different than how Virginia runs for office.
How so?
My campaign finances are very small, where Danica's is unlimited. I have $450 per person. And I don't have the ability to raise taxes in Colorado to build a great road. So a lot of the ideas that Danica used to run for office to win were things that I couldn't really do. And I had to think of ways to get around that and overcome some of those things that I didn't have available to me.
Were there any lessons learned? I mean, in many ways, I mean, you both have won many races against all odds, against history, within a very, very dangerous environment. Were there any lessons learned about how to win? For you, Representative. Then I have a specific question for you.
I mean, to win in a district, and my district was a pretty solidly Republican district, and we're not Virginia, but we have some hate groups in Colorado. My district was mostly Arvada. We were called Arvada Springs. Colorado Springs is where some of those hate groups are. And there were a lot of similarities in the viewpoints of people. So you couldn't run being trans and win in that district. You had to run on providing a service for the people and promising that you are going to do the work that was important to them. So we knocked on a lot of doors. And that was really the key, because most people that came before me never did it. So I was the first time anybody had ever seen a candidate at their door was when I was there. And that made a really big impression to people, because they said, no one's ever come to my door and knocked on it. And I was the first one to do that. And that was a big change for them. And they said, well, I'm willing to give you a try, even though 7,000 people voted for the Republican in the previous election. I won by a small margin of 439 in the next cycle.
I know when thinking about this winning strategy, one of the things that comes to mind, Senator, is in your memoir, you mentioned how you did your own research about the sort of opposition attacks that you were perhaps about to receive. No? So your own, I mean, which I don't even know, I don't even want to Google myself to see what's out there. So what was that like? What did you learn in that process about the best ways to win?
Sure. So, few things about best ways to win. Number one, when Brianna reached out to me in the first place and just said, hey, what should I do? The first thing I told her to do is go get trained. And I had gone through the LGBTQ Victory Institute's candidate campaign training program November 17th to 20th, 2016, right after the 2016 election. And then that February in 2017, I was a month into my campaign, and I went through Emerge Virginia's training program for Democratic women. And when we won in 2017, we had 15 seats that flipped red to blue that fall. 11 of us were women and 9 of us were Emerge alums. So that's the first thing that we should tell you here. Second thing here is what you just heard Representative Titone say about knocking on doors and being super aggressive with that. The one thing that is always in your control, whether you have a campaign finance limit that's frankly a couple $100, or you have sky's the limit, Virginia. The one thing that's in your control, no matter what that limit is how hard you personally are willing to work each day. And I don't just mean, what am I going to do to win the campaign? What am I going to do to win the month? What am I going to do to win today? How do I know I had a better day today than the person I'm running against? Did I knock more doors and have more quality conversations? Did I make more phone calls? Did I raise more money? Did I recruit more volunteers? Did I execute all the basics? Did I take care of my social media better? Did I do everything to my best ability? Did I maximize my time and made it efficient? Going through Emerge will help teach you how to do that. That's a huge thing of what we do. And now, fast forward, I'm now the executive director of Emerge Virginia. That brings us into the research part. One of the things that I've actually incorporated as executive director into our signature program is I actually have professional researchers who come in and talk about the importance of having your opposition research not only done on the person you're running against, but the person who you are. You need to know what's out there about yourself, because everything that comes from those oppo books plays into one of 4 boxes in the messaging box. What we say about us, what we say about them, what they say about us, what they say about them. The entire campaign is summed up in those 4 squares. That research informs 2 of those squares mightily, but it is still within your control to go out there and knock as many doors as it takes to wear out the soles of your shoes. And after I won that first election, I was on The Opposition with Jordan Klepper. It was the show that came after The Daily Show. And he asked me about winning. And I took off my shoes and I said, nothing beats wearing out the soles of your shoes. That's, in this past campaign, my left ankle still hurts from Labor Day weekend of last year when I had to knock 300 something doors in like 2 days in order to get to hit a giant goal. And I did. It sucked, but I did it. Yeah, but I won.
And I think part of the story now, that both of you illustrate, and also I think the moment that we're in as a country is that as people are mobilizing, right, as the closest we get to the prospect of a black woman in the White House, with that comes backlash. With sort of the Trumpism that is out there is nothing more threatening to the United States than this. That trans people in power, than black people in power, than Latinos in power. And as of today, there's over 600 anti-trans bills. All of that is rooted in immense mis and disinformation, obviously in the hateful rhetoric. I see it myself in my reporting all the time. I know it's a simple question. I think the question is always like, what can people do to counter that type of hatred? Like, what can we take away from that? What is the best way to counter the anti-trans hatred? And I'm sure both of you have a lot to say about that.
When they try to take our rights, we take their seats.
That's right.
The person who I beat in 2017 was the self-described chief homophobe of Virginia, who had filed more anti-LGBTQ bills than any other state legislator in America over 26 years, 13 terms since I was 7 years old. And we tried conventional in that race over and over again. Straight white man. We tried that. It took something a little bit different. And when we had a little bit different, you know what else we did? We had more volunteers than anyone had ever seen, ever in the history of that district. And in fact, we were running a congressional-sized campaign for a state house race. I've been through countless relentless anti-trans attacks. Representative Titone has been through countless relentless attacks. It's happened to both of us on the floors of our legislatures, and yet we're still here. And yet, when we speak up on trans rights, just the same as we speak up on anything else that's important, whether it's housing affordability one day, your commute the next day, taking care of the environment the day after that, all the other things that we get done. And both of us are very prolific legislators. I've passed 51 of my bills into law over 7 years, all with bipartisan support, including 14 bills to feed hungry kids. But the second you're a trans legislator and you talk about trans things, oh, you're only focused on this. You're not focused on the things that you spend most of your day focused on, right? And so just remember, is it fair? No. Suck it up. Of course it's not fair. It's politics. That's what people are going to do. You've got to be more resilient than the people who are flinging mud at you. And it can be frustrating because there's no accountability for them flinging mud. They can just say X, Y, or Z, which means you gotta have tough skin to do this job. And then here's the funny thing that happens. When you have that tough skin, you work in good faith, you genuinely, in both of our purple states, you work across the aisle, you get stuff done, and you have stuff to show for it. Then both of us won our second elections by way higher margins than we won our first. It is so important that you demonstrate excellence in constituent service, excellence in public policy, and when you do, what you've done will go beyond your district lines and it'll set a template that can be used nationally for how to succeed because of who you are, not despite it.
Hard to follow, but is there anything to add?
I know Danica always has all, she's got it down. I mean, this is something that I told people at the door. I was very honest with them, and politics and honesty are two words that are not always used in the same sentence. And that is something we need to work really hard to change, because the people should trust us when we're honest with them. When we vote a certain way that they may not agree, can we explain to them how that vote came about? Why did that happen? I told people, I'm not going to vote the way you want all the time. Most politicians will promise you the world and not deliver on it. They want somebody to tell it to them the way it is. And that really goes a long way when it comes to getting people to trust you. And when you can do that and you set the bar really high for what this job means, you can get some of the people who are not going to do the job very well to not run because they don't want to fill your shoes. But this is what it's supposed to be. This is how representations should be. And we're trans people, and we're representing people in a better way than most other people have never done. And that is something that we have to put on our shoulders to make sure that we are setting that example for other trans people to come along to do the same job, because we want more of us to be able to do it.
What have you learned about empathy? And I ask you this because I keep thinking about one of the things that President Obama said yesterday, right? Not only did he lay a very clear vision about what the next iteration of the Yes We Can movement is, but he also said something that stuck with me, and I'm trying to figure out how I feel. He said, he implored people to also listen to those that disagree with us. And when I think about that, I think of, the millions of people that are actively dehumanizing many people that are in this room. What do you make of that? What do you make of the practice of, and what does that look like from where you stand, of reaching across the aisle and talking to people and bringing people to your side that are actively dehumanizing you? In President Obama's words, I mean, can you do that?
So 51 bipartisan bills passed into law? Yeah, you can. That didn't come because my hair is so good looking. It came because I had to work my heart out, making sure that I had my district being represented. That means I represent Democrats and Republicans and independents and people who don't even agree with any of those three. My job is to represent my constituents. Listen to the language that you hear most of the people who spoke at the Republican National Convention use. And then not just them, but the CPACs of the world and all the side organizations that they use. We're the ones actively talking about the importance of bipartisanship all the time. Come to a purple district and watch your local trans state legislator talk about showing a lot of grace to people who can frankly be god-awful terrible toward us. And then I'm gonna give you a coda for this. My first 5 years in office, no anti-trans bills made it to the House floor. Republicans had control for the first 2 years, Democrats had control for the second 2, and then Republicans won back control for the last 2 of the 6 years that I was in the House. Democrats have control again now. Again, purple state. So year 5 comes, and the Republicans start filing anti-trans bills for the first time since 2017. And they were still dying in committee. They still weren't getting to the floor. And then in 2023, the Republican Speaker of the House was adamant that 2 anti-trans bills attacking kids had to make it to the floor, to the point that one of the Republican legislators who didn't support that legislation was told, go take a walk. Do not vote on this bill in subcommittee. Don't vote on the bill in committee. Don't vote on the floor, bill in full. I mean, that's the way that they were playing it at the time, right? And then when that happened, I told my caucus, I'm going to lead the opposition on the floor. Let me take care of it on second read. In Virginia, we debate the bill on second read. You can speak to the bill without debating on the third read, and then we vote on third read as well. I said, if you have anything that you want to add about these bills, save it for third. Let me take care of the questioning. And I did. The first one came up to prohibit trans student athletes from playing, sports with their friends. It was so poorly written, and I'm not kidding. It was so poorly written, George Mason University and Virginia Commonwealth University would have had to have forfeited all of their games against the University of Richmond in the Atlantic 10 if a trans woman was even allowed to try out for a team. But you mean the men's basketball ones, the flagships programs of VCU and GMU? That's right. And I pointed that out on the House floor, got the Education Committee chairman on record saying, oops. It was so not ready for prime time because what had happened was they took a bill that was drafted by anti-trans people from the outside, said, go focus on this, go do this. And they brought it up, and I dissected and destroyed that piece of legislation bit by bit. So the Republicans force it through the House, it gets in the Senate, and they file amendments to try to save face before a Democratic majority in the Senate squashes that. Second bill, forcibly outing trans kids regardless of their safety at home, as if trans kids who are outed aren't subject to violence, aren't beaten, and don't make a disproportionate number of homeless youth across the country. I even asked the patron of that bill if he was familiar with the statistic that 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. And he goes, oh, well, I talked to someone who said they didn't know anyone who had been kicked out like that. And I said, that's interesting. Go right up the street. And I named an organization, and you can meet those kids right there. So they forced that bill through. They amend that one for the Senate, and then that bill got squashed too. The whole point of that was to use it against people like me that fall and vulnerable Democrats. Oh, we're going to show them. The patrons of both of those bills lost and I won. What should that tell you? There is a ceiling to transphobic attacks and how effective it is. You know where it's most effective? Fundraising with their base. In terms of actually resulting in Democrats in vulnerable districts, mind you, losing elections on that issue, we had one Democrat between the Senate and the House last year who lost a seat in the general election last year, and it wasn't because of that issue. What we showed is that by having fact-based arguments, by putting them on the spot, and by flipping the script on it and running on our values and our accomplishments, not only could we demonstrate excellence in governments on our part, but we could show just how not ready for prime time the other side truly was the entire time. Just demonstrate good constituent service, good public policy acumen, and you can not only win debates, you can win elections too.
Well, I'll tell you that the state of Colorado, the grand old party, put anti-trans things into their platform and have been going against the trans community quite hard. But it came to an impasse around Pride when their email blast to fundraise was "God hates flags," and this made a lot of the national news. And it really backfired big time on them because now they are trying to get rid of the chair of the party. and he's been trying to have meetings literally under bridges on bike trails to say they had a meeting so he can escape getting voted out. There's a whole segment on the local NBC News thing about how, like, this is a soap opera. It's ridiculous. There's no appetite for this kind of hatred. And I call it out, I say how it is, and I challenge my Republican colleagues to say, is this what you're going to support? Is this what you're going to get behind? And more recently, we have a Senate candidate who is a trans woman in the rural part of southwest Colorado who's running for Senate. And the Republican Party put out a fundraising email and a support email to the Republican candidate. And they said lots of terrible things about the Senate candidate, Vivian Smotherman. And they even brought me into this and dead named me in this email that has nothing to do with that part of Colorado at all. They love to hate me. So I called the senator and I said, look, you need to call this out. You need to do something. And we have a good relationship. We've run bills together. We've written papers together on water stuff in Colorado. And I said, you got to do something. You have to call this out publicly. And he did. And he apologized to me and he apologized to Vivian. And he said, I don't want your help, party. Please stop this. So when we are present in these spaces and we are making these relationships, we are able to get people to understand, like, you're bashing people who are good people, who have been doing good things, and we've been doing good things together. And when the rhetoric happens, we're not the only ones that have to say something. We can get even people across the aisle to say something, and that's really important when it comes directly from them. And it doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's a powerful message, and it really deflates the hateful messages that are being pushed.
Can I just also put in a plug for Emerge alum, Michigan State Senator Mallory McMorrow? What happened when they sent out a fundraising email accusing her of being a groomer? She turned it around, raised $1 million herself, became a national figure in the Democratic Party, and has now spoken at our convention this year. Always make them pay for it. Always make them pay for it when they're the ones who are trying to single out and stigmatize the very people they're elected to serve in the first place, when they're the ones using phobias and all the other sort of scare tactics. And at the same time, pick your battles. It's so important to have that balance with it. But I wanted to use that because Mallory, she's an ally. She's not, she's not trans, she's not gay. She is simply a fearless fighter for her values and for her family and for her constituents. That's why she's got the platform she does today.
I'll say, and I know we have to wrap up quickly, but as you were talking about Colorado, one of the things that I had to cover during the midterm elections after the Club Q shooting, I spent a lot of time covering the Latino community and the Latino vote. And in Colorado, I remember specifically Stephen Miller, no other than Stephen Miller, with his, Make America First organization. One of the things that they did in the midterms right after the shooting was specifically target Spanish-speaking Latinos. They went through radio, they were on local TV stations, they were passing out flyers, and they were specifically using that anti-trans message to mobilize the community, and it backfired. To your point, why? Because the coalition came back together, and they used it as a way to dispel the stigma. But it was beautiful to see the way that people came together. A couple of questions more before we wrap. Main piece of advice for Vice President Harris. We have 2 more months until November, I don't even know, or 70 plus days. What is one thing you would tell her if she was here right now?
Early voting begins in Virginia on September 20th. Come to Jiffy Lube Live in Bristow. I already checked the calendar, they're open that day. And help us kick off early voting. That would be a terrific way to get the message out, because we're at the very front of the calendar for early voting. Tell people nationwide. We have the DC media market, trust me, you'll be talking to people nationwide. Come out to Virginia, and help us celebrate the beginning of voting, because when you do that, you're going to get the message out to people across the country that it's not just months away. Yesterday was 1 month away. We're now less than 1 month away from the first ballots of this election being cast, and you better believe I'll be doing it, by the way. So come to Virginia, and by the way, don't ignore the Colorados of the world. Don't ignore the Minnesotas of the world either. The 7 key battlegrounds, awesome, great. But as Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller would tell you, they would love to have her stop over in New Mexico because they could use a little bit of help there too, right? We've got down ballot races that we've got to win across the country no matter where we are this year. So let's go get it done.
I would also say that the momentum is on, and there is a lot of excitement in Colorado and everywhere, and everyone wants to talk about how they want to do something, they want to get behind this new candidate that we have, and we need to keep rolling with that. And I would say to the Vice President, keep that up and keep people excited, keep people motivated, and keep making fun of Trump's crowd sizes, because it really gets us motivated and gets him sad, and that makes him go a little crazy more, which always helps. So we have to keep doing that. But all of our races, like I'm up for re-election again this year. This is my final term in office. I can only run for 4 terms in the House. And when the House races and the Senate races are the kind of the glue that takes all of the up and down ballot races together, along with the congressional races, to really reach those grassroots people hitting the doors. And so when you support candidates like myself, we all help everybody else win and get the word out that Democrats are the way to go to win up and down. So that's what I would say.
And finally, you have a crowd of folks here. What can they do to support you? Because we know it takes resilience, like you said, it takes a lot of courage. What can they do to support you?
I want to give you two bits. One, you want to support us, support your community. Do the work in your community. Get trained to run for office if that's your calling. And by the way, this is an Emerge event right now. We are Emerge alums. And the best thing that you can do is run your country too, because this country belongs to you just as much as it does anyone else. So that's number one, is go take care of your own community. Number two, for those who are on the ballot, I'm not up again until 2027, bless. I had to win 4 very hard elections in 6 years, so I'm happy for the little break there. That said, make sure that when you go out to knock on doors to help out folks, yes, get people excited about the top of the ticket. Yes, get people excited about our federal offices. And remember our state government, which affects your day-to-day life so much. Remember to take care of your city councils and your town councils and your county boards and your county commissions, your school boards, your water and soil conservation districts, all the elected offices that you have in your local community, from clerk of the courts to your district attorneys to anything else. Take care of everything that you can and have good, empathetic people in those positions of power, because that's how a conversation changes someone's mind. Is when a neighbor to neighbor acts, when they see local demonstrations of excellence in government. That's how you win the conversation. That's not only how you change minds, it's how you build power, is making sure that your community is as strong as you can be. And remember to always be vulnerable enough to be visible. So no matter what you look like, where you come from, how you worship if you do, or who you love, or how you rock, that you can succeed because of who you are, not despite it, and not for what discriminatory politicians tell you you're supposed to be. You be you better than anyone else ever could, because you're the only one who ever can.
And just to build on that, get to know who your local elected officials and candidates are. Find out if there's a primary, which one you want to support, and support that person if their values align with you. It really comes down to that. We're regular people. We're regular people. We want to know who you are, and your local elected officials are the same. They want to know who you are. They want to know what you're about so they can do their job a little bit better. So get to know those people and stay within your community to do that. But also, there are other races in other places that are important as well. And I mean, I forget what the last count is of how many trans people there are elected right now. I'm
More
one of
than
those.
when I got in.
I'm one of those. I'm running again this year. It cost me resources to get here. I need to fundraise to bring some money back home to justify this trip. Wink, wink. And support candidates that are doing their emerge work, because when they do their training, they have to fundraise, and they have to fundraise for their position and their training. So help them out. So if there is a local emerge group in your area, then make sure that you get to know them and go to their events, and you'll be able to help more women run for office and win.
Thank you both so much. The moment we're in is about leading this country towards a better version of itself, and both of you are at the heart of what that looks like. So thank you so much.
Thank
A
you.
round of applause.